this video, we will be creating UI for our ball project. So by the end of this video, we will end up with this main menu, which when clicked on, will take us to our level, which has our main HUD. In the top right corner, you'll see the collected coins. On the left, you'll see the timer. And then from there, when we hit our goal, it completes the level. We'll also have our pause menu, which allows us to take us back to the level select or even quit the game. Once we quit the game, we can go back. And so once we're here, we also have our lose state. So once I hit the jump pad and I fall off the level, we have level failed. We will be tackling this UI subject in 3 waves, where the first wave, which covers the UI for our main menu along with all its logic, is supposed to give us a nice introduction to the widget system in Unreal, as well as give us the general workflow for creating UI and putting it on the screen. The second wave, which will consist of our main HUD, and this would be our timer and our collected. This will be more difficult than the last wave because we need to know information about when a ball is interacting with the pickup coin, as well as when the level is complete. So information about actors communicating with each other is necessary for this wave. The third wave, which consists of creating our pause menu, is easier than the second wave since it will just toggle the pause menu on the event that we either hit tab and then hit tab again to unpause it, or hit resume, or go back to the main menu. So all the resources I'm using for this game, such as the font and the background, will be included in the description below. So on that note, let's continue from where we last left off in the ball project. So continuing from where we last left off, the first thing I'm going to do is create an empty level to store our menu screen. So I can do this by going to File, New Level, and then have an empty level. And then from there, I'm just going to put Control S and say Main Menu. So this is the level we're going to initially start with when we start the game. So I'm going to put Save. So from here, I'm going to be creating a folder. So double click on that. And I'm going to have this under the contents. And I'm going to name this UI. So I'm going to name this widget UI. So in here, I'm going to right click, and under user interface, there's going to be a widget blueprint. And this is what we're going to be using to create our display onto the screen. So I'm going to rename this. The naming convention is WBP, standing for widget blueprints, and the name. So this is going to be main menu. So I'm going to click on that. So from here, you'll notice there are 2 tabs. The first is the designer and the second is the graph. We're going to be using the designer to design how our UI will look like onto the screen. And we'll be using the graph to program how the UI will update as the game goes along. So before we start designing our main menu, we're first going to have a quick demo of how the sizes work. So currently, if we go into the screen size, we'll notice that the screen size is set to 1280 by 720. For most modern computers or monitors, the default will be 920 by 1080. So you can have that by either left clicking and going to monitor and have 21 by 24, or you can change it through this arrow in here. So whatever size you're wanting it to be. So I'm going to be using this default 21 by 580. You can also adjust it for phone sizes as well. So these are all the predefined sizes you can choose from to accommodate your specific platform. So now that we have the size out of the way, we're going to be creating a text just to demo how UI would work and how we can position certain UI elements in the screen. So the first is going to be, we're going to be taking a look at the anchor. So you'll notice there's a bunch of positions for this anchor. So if I were to hit left, as you can see in here, this is the anchor point, this flower. So by hitting this middle button, you'll notice that the anchor point is changing. But you'll notice the text isn't really changing right now. But you'll notice in the position X and the position Y are changing. So if I change this to top left, you'll notice the position X is changing. And this position is the position of the text relative to the anchor. So if I were to have the anchor in dead center, you'll notice that the position of the text is -x because it's in the negative portion of the anchor. So by setting it to 0, it will place it, by setting the x position to 0, it will place it in the exact coordinate of the anchor. So we'll have it in the bottom right corner of the anchor. Now from here, we can fine tune this by changing the alignment. So right now in the alignment of 0, 0, the text block is at the right corner of the anchor. So by changing it to 1, 1, we should expect it to be in the top left corner, which is what it does. So if we're trying to have it dead center, then we're going to have to meet halfway between the x and the y, which would mean that I would have to have it 0.5 and 0.5 to have it dead center in the anchor. And from there I can compile that and save that. And that's the text. So if we're trying to get this onto the screen, now this isn't really our main menu, but we're just trying to, for this workflow, we're just trying to see how we can get text just on the screen. So we can minimize that. And the way we will be approaching this is we're going to be making a new folder to store the classes that are responsible for adding text onto the screen. So we're going to be creating a new folder, and I'm going to be calling this folder Game Frameworks. Rename this BP_Game Framework. So from there, I can right click and add a new blueprint class, and this class will be a game mode base. So we're going to click on that, the game mode base, and we're going to name this BP_menu game menu. So this game menu is going to be responsible for adding the text onto the screen. So whatever text is displayed in this widget blueprint in here will be appended onto the screen. So the way we can do this is, so we're going to go to our main menu. In this case, our game menu is not only responsible for adding text on the screen, but also it acts more as a managerial class. It will assign which pawn to possess. So in this case, our default pawn will be our BP_sphere. That's what I named my character, or BP_ball pawn. So now with that class possessed, I'm just going to compile that and save it. And now I'm going to go into the event graph. And from here, all I would have to do is under event begin play, I'm going to say create widget. And the widget class is the class I'm instantiating. So it will be WBP_main menu. And this will contain our text variable. Once we've done that, and once we've made an instance of our HUD, then all we'd have to do is add that to the viewport. There we go. So we're going to compile that. Okay, so the compilation failed, and that's because what we're adding to the viewport is the HUD. So I'm going to just promote this to a variable. So we could either promote that to variable or just connect it automatically. So we have our blueprint, and then if I compile that, you'll notice it will compile. So just to make things cleaner, I'm going to have this variable which represents our HUD reference. I'm going to rename this HUD or main menu reference. And then I'll just have that under the target just to make things a little cleaner. And I'll take out that connection. So the thing we're adding to the viewport is the main menu. So now in our project settings, what we're going to do is go under maps and modes, and we're going to set the default map to be the main menu, since this is the map that the player initially starts with. So we're going to have main menu for both of it. With that out of the way, So if I hit play, we'll notice it still doesn't have the text onto the screen. And because I forgot that last step where we have to assign the game mode to the specific level. So you'll notice under the world settings, currently the game mode is set to nothing. It's set to none. And we need to override that so that it's using our game mode, which we just created, our main menu game mode. So if I go under BP underscore main menu, this is now using our main menu. Another way you could have assigned this is under the blueprint section. There's a section where you can click on the type of blueprints you're gonna override. So each map will have its own game mode. And the way we're approaching this is we're using our game mode to add text onto the screen. So that would mean that our levels will have its own game mode, which will create its own widget. And our main menu will have this game mode, which creates the main menu HUD. So from there, if I hit play, I promoted it to a variable, but then I forgot to assign it in here. So I'm just going to do that really quick. So I'm going to name this menu reference. And then just have that assigned in here. You could have just directly used a return pin and add it to the viewport. So from there, I'm going to hit play, and then we have our text block. So this is the main workflow that we used to get the text onto the screen. Is the first thing we did is we created our widget. So we can do that under add new, and then user interface and widget blueprints. Once we've created that, then we added a certain text element in here in the designer section. Once that was done, we created this game mode, menu game mode, which created an instance of our HUD. And we had just a reference to that, just in case we were going to use this main menu reference in other places. And then we added that to the viewport. And that's the main workflow. So create an instance in the game mode, and then add it to the viewport, and make sure that the level is set to the game mode that's creating our widget. So now with that out of the way, I'm going to be going into my main menu, and I'm going to be deleting this text box. And the first thing I'm going to be doing is adding a background image. So I can do so by going to border and just having that in the canvas. So from there, I'm going to choose the anchor to be the whole screen. And as you'll notice, choosing the anchor to be the whole screen gives me these 4 white dashes. And we'll notice there's an offset. And essentially the offset is how much of the widget currently is cutting off from the anchor. So relative to the anchor, how many units are we removing? So if I chose to remove 0 units, we'll notice that the shape will extend far away to the left, and the same will be for the right. So if I remove 0 units away from the widget relative to the anchor, that will mean it extends the whole block. And I can do the same for the top. So I don't want you to remove 400 units, just extend it and do the same for the bottom. So with that, now I'm going to be creating our image, which I have linked in the description below. So the way we can get our image is we're going to just go under the appearance tab and select the image we want. So right now I'm going to import the image. So I'll do that really quick. So just before I start creating the image, I'm just going to add a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder background images. So once I create that folder, I'm just going to import my image, and it's just a regular JPEG image. So it's a shout out to Clifford Merville. So as that's importing, just going to wait for that to end. Okay, so with that imported, I'm also going to create a folder for my fonts. I'm going to say new folder, and I'm going to make this fonts. I'm going to have this under the content. I'm going to rename this fonts. fonts. So with the fonts folder, I haven't experimented with a lot of the formatting, but what worked for me was the .ttf format. So you can try making sure that when you do download the Harry Potter font, you just have it as you just drag it as a .ttf. I have my Harry Potter font, and then I can have the .ttf and just drag it into here. And that's it. And then hit yes. So now going back into our widget, we're going to choose our image, which is going to be Pixel Clifford Miller. Okay, so that's our image. And now we're going to be creating our button. So we're going to add a vertical box to stack everything on top of each other. I'm going to add the vertical box onto the canvas. And so we have our vertical box at the top left corner right now. So I'm going to anchor it dead center. And I'm just going to have the anchor, it's going to be this center in here. So from there, I can choose where the position would be. In this case, I want it dead center, so 0, 0 with an alignment of 0.5, 0.5. And I'm going to choose how much it should cut off from the top. In this case, it's cutting off nothing, so I might just want to cut off 400. So offset top, offset bottom. Right now it's 1000, so I'll just have that be 400. So here we go. We have our offset. And I'm just going to make the size slightly bigger. So the size X is 100. I'm just going to change that to maybe 250. I'll have it 250 for both. There we go. So now with that, I'm going to be adding text onto the screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a button or add a border. And this is supposed to identify our main menu. So we have that, and I'm going to add text underneath that border. So one thing you'll notice is the text is underneath the border. So let me just change the color of the text. So we have our text block, and you'll notice that the text is appearing on top of the border, on top of this border, and as well as on top of this border. And the reason that's the case is because the text block is the most nested. So the more you nest your element, the higher order will be. In this case, since the text block is nested under the border, that means the border is going to be the background for that text block. So with that, I'm going to change the font of the text, and I can do this by going into the Appearance tab and going into Font, and then changing the font material. Not font material. It would be the font family. And it's going to be Harry P. And I'm going to put this, I'm going to name this levels. Now to change the color of our background, let me just change the size to be 50, 55. And I'm also going to want to center this. So under the border slot, I'm going to center this to the middle. There we go. I'm going to compile that. Cool. So I think it did change the color. Let me change it to black. And let me change this border to be, let me revert this. Okay, so we have our appearance, and so the tint is going to be the color. So I changed the background to be this bluish gray, and I changed this color to be that. Just have the appearance. So the color is something you can play with. So I'll have that. So with that, I'm going to create our button. If you're wanting the exact style that I used, then I'll have that in a comment below. So under the text, I'm going to have level 1. So this is going to be the logic that's responsible for opening up level 1. So I'm just going to make sure, one thing I could do is in here, I can change the font to be the thing I want. And this is probably also going to be the same design as the other 3 buttons. So I'll have 50, or not 50. I want to make the 45, or 40 is good. So I'm just going to add a border separation between the two. So have border and have that under here. And I can just click on this arrow, or I can move this border in here. So I'll have it there to make separation between the title and the level selection. So I can make the separation a little bit bigger by going into this padding tab in the content and just having the padding just larger. Or maybe 6. There we go. And then I can just change the color in the appearance tab to be a darker blue. So we have that. And for the button, all I need to change is maybe have it be this light purplish color. So I'm just going to rename this button, rename this variable button level 1. So now that we have our first button designed, I'm just going to be a little bit lazy and just add the other 2 buttons without having to design them. I will add the font for them, but not change the color. So we'll have our text. And then I'll just change the font to be Harry P. And then I'll just change the size to be 40. And I'll do the same for the third one. Button. And have the button. And have the text be Harry P. And now I'll also change the size to be 50 or 40. So from there, I'm just going to change the content to be level 2. I'm going to change the content to be level 3. And then I'm going to also add a quit button. So button quit. So I'll add a slight border to it. I'll just use this arrow to change the hierarchy. So now we have it here instead of it being at the very bottom. Now it's after the border. So in here, I can add the quit box, so text, and add my quit. So I'm just going to change the padding to be 6, like it was in the other section. So with that, I'm just going to create my text. So I'm just going to make this the quit button. And I'm going to change the size to be 50 or 40. Now I'm going to be creating the logic as what this main menu should do. So just before that, I'm just going to play the level just to see how it looks like. So we have our levels, and then we have our on hover state. So I think this is, aside from the color, I think it's pretty good. Now we're going to be creating the logic, which isn't that difficult. So under the main menu, I'm going to be clicking on my levels tab, and I'm going to be renaming the components in my hierarchy. So right now I have level 1, which is the name of my button. So you'll notice that every button in here is ticked as this variable by default. So I don't need to tick it again. And what that does, this variable, is it appends it to these variable sections in here. So button 113, that corresponds to this button in here for level 2. And we're going to be using this so that when the user clicks on this button, it opens a level. So we have level 1, I'm going to go through renaming these buttons. So I'm going to name this level 2. And I'm going to rename this level 3. Or maybe, to be more descriptive, I can name this button level 3. And the same for the other two. And button level 1. So if I compile that, and then go into the graph section, we have our button level 1, button level 2, button level 3. So if we go into our designer, we have this quit button. So I'll just say this is the quit button. So with that, now we have all the names. And for the actual graph section, all I would have to do is, so now in the graph section, if I were to click on button level 1, I want it to open the level on the event that the user clicks on the button. So I can left click on clicked. And on the event that the user clicks the button, I'm going to say open level. And this is going to be the name of the level, which should match exactly the name that I've given it in my levels folder. So in here I have level 1. So I'm just going to have to do the same thing in my, I'm going to have to do the same thing in here. So level 1. And I'm going to be doing the same thing for the other two. So button level 2 on clicked. It will be open level. And it will be level 2. And button level 3 on clicked. Open level. And it will be level 3. And our last button will be button quit. So for this last one, the quit level, all we'd have to do is have quit game. And from the quit game, we have an option. Should we just quit the game or have it as a background process? So I'm just going to leave it as quit game. I'm going to save that. I'm going to compile, save that. And we're going to be testing this logic. So in here, if I put quit, it quits the game. If I hit play, hit level 1, it takes me to the first level. If I go back, hit level 2, it takes me to the second level. And if I click level 3, it takes me to the third level. So everything seems to be working with that logic. So this concludes the first wave. And now we're going to be going into our second wave, which consists of the game HUD. So to start off, I'm going to be creating a widget UI. And I'm going to be saying this is WBP underscore game HUD. So this just contains the information we need, the information we constantly see in the level. So that would be the timer, and that would also be how many coins got collected and such. We're also going to have our pause menu within this HUD as well. Or no, sorry. Our pause menu will be somewhere else. So in our game HUD, the way that we're going to be approaching this is we're going to create a text. So I'm going to left click, drag it. And this is going to be the information. This will be our timer. So all I'm going to do is have it be a timer text, or the format of this will be 0. So the default format will be 0:00:00:0:0. So I have my text, and I'm going to be making this anchored to the left That's fine. And then I'll have it 200 units away from the left. And maybe 150 away from the top. I'm just going to change the size. So let's say around 40 maybe would be good, or 50. And I'm just going to say to match the size of the border to the size of the text, all I would have to do is go into the size to content and then hit OK. So now that we have our text, I'm going to do the same for the other corner. So I'm going to put text and left click, drag that. And then in here, I'm going to change the anchor to be the rightmost. And it's going to be like what we have in here, 200 away from the left. This will be 200 away from the right. So it will be minus 200. And for the position Y, it's 150. So I'll just have it be the same for this. And maybe, and I'm also going to change the size of the text to be so I'm just going to change the default to be collected and 0 collected 0-0. So this will just be the default name. And I'm just going to change the size to be whatever the size was, which is 50. So I'll have this be 50 as well. I'm just going to change this to be a minus 300, minus 500. So I think that's good. Going to make the size of our box to be the same as the text we have in here. We're going to have our level complete text. So we have text, level complete. So I'm just going to drag that into the center. And I'm going to have it dead center. So I'm going to have the alignment 0.5 to 0.5. I'm going to have the positions both 0. So with that, I'm also going to rename this level complete. And I'm going to change the size to be the biggest of all of them. So I'm just going to make this 70. I'm going to change the size to content. There we go. So now that we have our level complete, this will be what we see on the screen. So I want this to show only on the event that player either fails a level or wins the level. So I'm going to have to change the appearance to be by default hidden. And I can do that by clicking on the text, and under the behavior tab, we'll have the visibility set to hidden. So we have that, we'll compile. So that would mean that when we start this level, then this text is going to be hidden. So we can test this out really quick. And the way we can test it out is I'm going to go to our game frameworks, because that's the thing that is adding our widgets to the actual viewport of the level. So I'm going to make a new game mode, and I'm going to call this game mode base. So BP underscore game HUD. So then clicking on this, I'm just going to choose the actual, the pawn to possess is going to be BP underscore ball pawn. And I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to go to the event graph, and under begin play, I'm going to do like what I did with the main menu. I'm going to create a widget. And this widget is going to be the HUD, so WBP game HUD. And then from there, I'm just going to add that to the viewport. Once that's done, then I can go into the main level, or I can go into a level that I want this HUD to appear in. So in this case, it will be level 1, for example. And I'm going to go under the blueprint override. I'm going to select a game mode, and this is going to be BP_game HUD. And we see also in the override that it overrides it in here as well. So with that, now I can play the level, and we see that by default, the text is hidden. And since this level is a little bit bright, but tilting down, we notice that we have our text as well as the game being hidden. So now with that, I can go into my widget. So now we're going to be creating a list of functions to allow the text that we have in here to be updated. And we're going to be calling these functions within the game HUD. And the reason it's being called in the game HUD is because the game HUD is this managerial class where it can call the task to be performed, but it isn't aware of the specific tasks that it's doing. So we're going to have in our game HUD a reference to our, we're going to have in our game, game HUD a reference to this WBP game HUD. And from there, we're going to be calling functions within the WBP HUD to update the text. Before we define these functions, we're going to first make these variables, and we're going to make these texts in here variables. So the way we can do this is I'm going to create this variable name. So I clicked on the collected, and I'm going to change the name to be collected text. So from there, I'm going to just make this a variable. This, we'll notice that with the button, if I were to just have a button in here, we'll notice by default that the button is set as a variable, whereas this text is not. So it's an important thing to remember that text by default are not set to variables. So you have to set them to variables by hitting this is variable tab. And by doing this, we'll notice now we have our collected text in the variable section. So we're going to be doing this for all three of them. So in here, it would be timer text. We're going to set that to a variable. And we're going to have our level complete. So it will be level complete text. And I'm going to set that to a variable as well. So we have our timer text, level complete text, and our collected text. And this will appear in here. So now we're going to be creating three functions. The first is to update the timer text. So the way I can update this is I'm going to name this function update timer text. And the way we can update text that we already have by default is by calling this function called setText. So I'm just going to get this timer text, and I'm going to drag that, and I'm going to have a function in there called setText. And we'll notice that the setText takes in a text as its argument, so a text data type. And one thing you might be thinking is like, what's the difference between a text and a string? And the difference would be that the string has a series of operations that modifies the characters of that string, so everything within the quotation marks, whereas a text contains the responsibility of changing the format of that text and the size of it. So what you see on screen in gameplay would be a text variable rather than a string variable. And the text contains information about the style of the text as well as its size within the actual viewport, whereas a string does not. So now with that, I just drag this pin into this update function just so that I have as input a text. So from there, I have this function that I will call within the game mode, and I'm going to add another function called update, and this will be update level result. So for the update level result, I need to know whether the player wins or not, and I can do this by adding an input to our function that's going to be called within the game mode, or that's going to be called within the end goal, where it will set the update level result to success or not. So this variable is just going to be called did player win. So on the event that the player did win, I'm going to update the text to be level complete. So I'm going to have a branch check in here. So did player win? And if that's true, then I'm going to take my level completed text. I think I named this level completed, but I'll instead name it level result. Level result, because it could have been level failed as well. So I want to account for that by doing that. So we have our level result. So from there, I want to update the text, and I can do that by dragging from within that variable and say set text. And the text on the event that the player succeeds. So did the player win? If that's true, then I want the text to be level complete. And on the event that the player lost, then I want to set the text to level failed. So I'm just going to copy this level result and paste it in. And I'm going to say set text to level failed. I'm going to name this level failed. And from here, I want this text to be shown because by default it's hidden. And I can do so by taking the level result. So level result text. And in here, writing set visibility. And this visibility will be, right now it's hidden. It was hidden and I'm making it visible. So I'm going to be doing the same thing for this as well. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste that in here. And I'm going to drag I'm going to put the set visibility level to visible for both. So we have our condition on the event that the player wins and the player loses. One thing I just remembered within the game mode, or within our main menu. So you'll notice if I go into the main menu, right now I can click and then go to level 1. But one issue though is that if I were to just go into the main menu and click anywhere else, the cursor disappears and I can't really do anything. So even if I'm left clicking, you notice that there's nothing I can do to actually play the game. And the reason this exists is because, and the reason this is an issue is because right now our main menu is creating a widget and adding it to the viewport, but it's having the input set to UI right now. So the way I can fix this is by using something called a player controller. So the player controller just represents the soul of the game. So if you're a character just walking and you were to go into a car, for example, then the controls convert to a car. And the way that's able to be accomplished is that the player controller shifts from being possessed by a player to being possessed by a car. And it also works by it also is handy for when a character dies, because then you can transfer the soul of the character from the current one who just died to a new one. And that way we can leave that character that that player was just playing with to be there. and then destroy him later. So get player controller. And in this case, we're using the player controller just to define the inputs for the viewport. So right now it's set to game only, which means that once I click, it will only listen for events and it won't listen to any click events. But I can change that by saying set input mode UI only. And by doing this, I can listen for just UI events. And this is something I would want when the main menu is loaded into the level. Another thing I would want to do is also allow the player to see the cursor. So once the player clicks on the game, then the cursor hides away. So I want to revert that by saying show mouse cursor, set show mouse cursor, and then have that set to visible. And then just connect everything from there. So with that, now if I go into my main level, we'll notice that even if I click away from the main level, I can still function. So if I were to click on level 1, now we'll notice we've encountered another issue where it's listening for this main menu and this UI only. But then once I actually go into the main level and hit and left click, I can't actually do anything. And this is an expected error. This just means that in our game HUD, before we create our widget, we would have to revert what we had our player controller set to. So all we would have to do is get the player controller and revert what we had set initially within our game mode, within our main menu game mode. So show mouse cursor, and we're gonna make this disappear. So we're gonna have the show mouse cursor be off, and we're also going to get the player controller and have set input mode game only. So with that, I can just connect everything and then create the instance of the widget. So that way everything's set up before I create this instance. So by testing this, so we have our game mode. So we have our game mode and testing this out. If I go into my main menu, you'll notice I can click away. If I go into level 1, the mouse goes away and then I can access the controls again. So that fixes our issue. So what we can do now is once we go into our main level, so once we go into our level 1, we have a timer in the very top left. So we're gonna be updating that. So the way we can update it is going into our game mode. Within the event tick, I'm gonna first check, is the player playing? So branch, and I'm gonna have a variable within here set to is playing. Because if the player is not playing, then, so like if the level's over, for example, I wouldn't want to update this timer. So in the event that the player dies or the player wins, don't update this level anymore. So I'm gonna have this variable is playing, and I'm gonna drag it, and I'm gonna have this within this condition. So from there, I'm gonna have my delta seconds. So I'm gonna create a variable called total time, and this will be the time that the player is currently in the level. So variable total time, and instead of it being a Boolean, I'm gonna click on it and then drag on this left pin here, and I'm gonna make this a float. And the way I'm gonna update the time, I'm just gonna take the tick event and I'm gonna say plus float and take the tick event and add it to the total time. So currently the total time is set to 0. So currently the tick is 0, but by adding it to the total time, I can reassign it to be, so if I were to hit Alt and left click, I can set it, and I can set the tick event to be the current value of the tick event plus the delta time, and I can do this on each frame to update the timer. So I can have that, and then on the event that it's true, I can call the function update timer text, So we'll notice that this function update timer text, we're going to call this within our WBP game HUD. So right now we have our update timer text, which is contained within our WBP game HUD. So if I go into our game HUD, we'll notice right here where I create an instance of the game HUD. So we'll notice in the game mode HUD, right now it has a reference to our WBP game HUD. So all we would have to do, so we want to call this function update timer text. To do that, we're going to just promote this to a variable. So we're just going to, let me just get rid of that. I'm going to rename this game HUD reference. And I'm just going to add that to the viewport like we had previously. And I'm going to make the target the game HUD. So we have that. So if we compile that. And now within our tick event, since we're updating the timer text, we're going to use the game HUD that we just stored a reference to. So I'm going to take our game HUD and I'm going to call a function within there, and that's the function that we're going to be using to update our text. So it's going to be game HUD update timer text. So from there, I'm going to have this update timer text in here, and now the new text that it's going to be supplied with is going to be the total time. So I can just plug that in here, and then there's going to be a string. There's going to be a text conversion between a float to a text. So now if we try that out and just play the level and hit level 1, we'll notice currently it's not calling the event tick. So one thing I can try. Oh, and that's because right now the is playing is set to false. So I'll just set that to true by default. And then when the player is not playing, I'll set it to false. And now we have our timer text. So right now, it still doesn't look like it would be in the demo. And the reason that's the case is because the formatting is different. So now we're going to be talking about how we can format our timer text. So going into our game HUD, we're going to be changing the thing that's being supplied within this argument. So we have our game HUD. And in here, instead of just doing this conversion, I want to format this so I'm going to format this. And I can do this by just taking a node from the string return type and say from seconds. So we'll give us the ability to format it. So if I were to right click and split to struct, then I have information about the current number I have in regards to it being in seconds, hours, and milliseconds. So all we would have to do now for the actual formatting is, I would say format text, and then from there, I would have the type of formatting. So I'm going to have curly brace, and it's going to be the name. So I'm just going to give it minutes, but you could have named it anything. And then close the curly brace. And then I'm going to do colon, and this colon is optional. So the only thing you actually need is the curly brace followed by the name inside of it. And this colon is going to be the thing that gets rendered. So colon seconds, or I'll just say S. I'll have a second. And the last one is milliseconds, so I'll just have it MS. So from there we have our variables. So I can say seconds, so minutes, I'll drag to minutes. Seconds, I'll drag to seconds. And milliseconds, I'll drag to milliseconds. And then the return type is a text, so I can just drag that within this text in here. So with that, I can compile that and save. And if I go back to the main level, level 1, we'll notice the formatting is now closer to what we're expecting. Yeah, but one thing we could do, just to show that this is not really magic, I can add spaces, and we'll notice by adding spaces, it will change the formatting slightly. So if I were to play the game and go to main level, we'll notice that it's the same thing, just with larger spaces, just to show that the colons is actually getting rendered in the level. So it's not something to do with the actual code. So I can get rid of those spaces and compile that, save it. And now all I would have to do is, as it is right now, the formatting is slightly weird in a sense that I think the third argument, or the milliseconds, is slightly too fast by it showing 3 decimal places. So I can cut off a decimal place by just doing integer division and dividing it by 10. So if I go into my game mode, before I supply it into the format text, I'm just going to say divide by integer, and I can say the division is going to be 10. And then supply that within our milliseconds. So we have that. And if I play the game, level 1, now we have it slightly better than what it was prior, or at least in my opinion. So now with our text updated, we're going to be going into our level complete. So the way that our level complete gets executed, update level result. So we know that this update level result should be called in the event that the player won. So the way I can do this is I can go for when the player wins the game. So in that case, that's going to be when the player is hitting this BP underscore end goal. So what I can do is get rid of this print string and then say get game mode. And this just means I just want to call this in the event that we're actually in the main level, because otherwise I don't want this function to execute in the event that we're in the level select menu. So I want to make sure that in this case we're in the game HUD. So BP cast to BP underscore game HUD, because otherwise the game mode would be the main menu in the event that we were in the main menu level where we're selecting levels. So in the event that we're not in the main menu, where we're in an actual game HUD, and then from there, as a game HUD, I'm going to get the game HUD reference. And then from there, I'm going to say update text. Update, in this case, it would be update level result. So it's important to note that right now we're in the end goal. And in the event that the player is hitting the end goal, then that means that they won the level. So I should check this to true. And by checking this to true, in the WBP game HUD, this will be set to true, which means it will execute these 2 branches, which means it will set the level, it will set the text, it will update it to level complete, and it will make it visible within the screen. So sort of to test this out, I'm going to compile this and save it, and just connect everything as is. And go back to the main menu and test if this works. So we notice it says level complete. So this works, but one thing we want to keep in mind is we're going to abstract this even further, just because having our structured function in this way is going to result in an event where we can both fail the level and complete the level. The way we are able to solve this issue is going to be going into our game mode HUD and creating another function in there called isLevelOver. Level over. And then within that level over, I can create an input, and then I can say this input is did player win. So if the player wins, so on the event that the player won, then I can call a function for updating the text. So I'm going to have a branch, and then from there, I'm going to say, I'm just going to unclick this. So I just want to know that if the player is still playing the game. So I can do that by dragging isPlaying. And so in the event that the player won, I'm just going to take our game HUD reference, and I'm going to update level result. And from there, I can have the did player win in here. So I can just add a couple reroute nodes by left clicking. So I can drag this and I can drag that. So did player win in the event that the player won. So update level results. So if I click on that, it takes me to this node in here. So set text and set visibility. So this way, by doing it this way, this means that our end goal doesn't need to know about our HUD reference. So we can even delete that altogether and just use a reference to our game mode and call a function within our game mode. This just creates a level of abstraction so that the end goal isn't responsible for modifying the HUD. So from there, we'll say level over. So that way, all the updations of the text is every text that gets updated will fall under the game mode instead of it being called within the end goal or the pickup. So then did player win? We'll say yes, because this is the end goal. So this is just a slightly more structured way of doing things. So that way we wouldn't need a HUD reference in the end goal. So when we do this, we'll play it, and what we should expect is the same sort of functionality. So we have our text, and when we click, it says level complete. So this is the same thing we had prior, but just in a slightly more structured way. And then just having it in this structured way means that if we can go in our game mode, we can set, so in the event that the level is over, we know for sure that the player isn't playing anymore. So after we set the level result text, what we can say is set is playing. So this is the is playing that we have in here. So we can just get that and set is playing, and we set that to false, because in the event that the level is over, we don't need to worry about whether the player is playing or not, because they're obviously not if the level is over. And by doing this, that means that in our event graph where we have this event tick and we check if they're playing, that means it's going to stop the timer from continuing adding things to the level. So if we were to test this out, go into level 1 and go into our, so that means when we touch, it stops the timer from going. So now with the timer stopped, I want to make it so that once the player hits the timer, then they can transition back into the main level. So I can do this by going into our game HUD, and under the function where the level is over, we know since the level is over, all we would want to do is go back to the main menu. And the way we can do this is having a function in there called set timer by text, set timer by function name. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to so once we know that the level is over, I'm gonna take I'm wanting the ball to go back to the main menu, and the way we can do this is by calling a function called set timer by function name. And the reason I'm using this is because I can add a delay to it, and this delay will be 2 seconds. And now we're gonna need to supply a function name in here. So I'm gonna go into my functions tab and create a new function, and I'm gonna call this function, name this function return to main menu. Or return to menu. So we have this, and all this should do is open a level, and this level will be the main menu. Main menu. So we're just going to test if that works. So going back, it should stop the timer, and then once that's done, 2 seconds later, it should take me to the main menu. So let's stop the timer 2 seconds later. Okay. Oh, I forgot to do, so we have our game mode, and we have this open menu, but I never specified the function name. So yeah, I would have to do that. So I'm gonna just copy the name and have that in here. And now I should test it. And one thing I'm also going to do is, or for someone reviewing this code, it will be difficult for them to find this function if there was like a lot of functions in here. So what I'll do is I'll just do Alt and I'll just take this. So that way they know it's not connected to any of the code, but they know that when they see this function return to menu, it's referring to this node in here, just so that it's easier for them to find. So if I go back to the main menu, go to level 1, and we have our end goal. It calls end goal. 2 seconds later, it takes me back to the main level. So this handles our success state for when the coins are being picked up. Now we should cover our the state when the player loses. So the way I can do this is by creating some sort of death zone. And the way I can do this is I'm just going to have this under an interactions folder, since you're interacting with the death zone. And I'm going to say it's going to be an actor, and I'm going to call this death zone. So I'm just going to rename this. So I'm just going to rename this to BP underscore death zone. And now I'm going to click on it and open blueprints. And I'm going to add a component, and then it's going to be a box collider. So from the box collision, I'm going to make it the root component. I'm going to compile that. So on the construction script, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a function called setBoxExtent. SetBoxExtent, and it will just set the extent of the box. So right now it's taking that box as a reference, which is this box in here, which is good. And now I'm just going to promote this to a variable and just have it so that you can update this within the editor. So I'm going to rename this to box extent. And I'm going to compile this. So now with that, I'll just have the box extent to be by default 100. 100 by 100 by 100. And change its Z value to be around 50 maybe. So if I were to compile that and go back, even less than that, maybe 25. One thing we'll notice is our box should overlap between, should be as large as this level, since it's the death zone. And I can do that by just clicking on the death zone and under, just going to make this box extent public. So then we have in the details panel, we'll have the box extent. And then I feel like this is going to be maybe 2000. I'm going to drag this and have this be 2000. There we go. So that's still not long enough. So this is maybe 10,000. Which I think is a bit, so I'm going to make this 9,000. Which is pretty much covering the whole space. So I'm going to make this 9,000 as well for the y-axis. So we notice it's covering the whole space. So I just want to make sure that this box, this death zone is not going to be triggered unless the player falls. And the way I can do this is just have it slightly down. So there's some space between when the player falls and when he hits the death zone. So I can even change the perspective view to be left. And we notice this is our box, this is our level, and this is our box. So yeah, I think this is a good distance, maybe slightly lower. And now going back to perspective. So now what we're going to do is we're going to need an interact event because our ball is going to have to communicate with this death zone. And the way we can do this is going to our box collider and then scrolling down And then we have our on components. And this was very similar to how we did our interaction video. So this is going to be called when the two actors are overlapping with each other. And we want to see on the event that the actor can be casted to BP underscore ball upon, which is the actor we have. And on the event that this cast is successful, then what I want to do is get the game mode to make sure that get game mode and make sure that that game mode can be casted to BP game HUD. So on the event that that's true, then within the game HUD, I'm going to call this function called set level over. And then from there, since the player lost, we'll just have that left as blank. And then this will take care of the event where it will return to the menu and it will update the level result to be a level failed. So we already have that set up from prior function calls. So now if we test this out, and then I fell, level failed, 2 seconds later, it takes me back to the main level. So now this covers the win-lose state of the game. And now all we would have to do is create the pickup events so that when the player starts the level, currently we have our collected set as 0, 0. So it has no information about the pickups. And yeah, so we need to update that for our game HUD. And then we would also need to create our pause menu. So we're going to be focusing on the game HUD for now. So we're going to update this collected text on the very top right. So the way we can do this is going back to our game framework and in our game HUD. On the event that we begin play, in the event that we have our begin play, we have all this logic in here to create the widget and define the mouse cursor. So once we do that, once we have our HUD reference, what I'm going to do is before I add it to the viewport, I'm going to make sure that I get all the actors. So in here, I have my function within my HUD called, I have a function within our BP game HUD called collected text. And this function in here, so update collected, I would need to create this function. So I'm going to create a function to update our collected text. So this function is going to be called update collected text. So we have that. And what this function is what this function is going to do is it's going to update the collected text. So there are two variables within our collected text that we should be aware of. So I'm going to use an append string. And in here, I'm just going to add 4 other pins. So the format that we're going for is collected, followed by a space. And then we're going to have our input. And this is going to be the number of coins collected. So if I were to compile that, and here it's going to be under the inputs, it's going to be currently collected. And we're going to have a division because it's currently collected. And then after that, we're going to have total coins in level. So in here, total coins in level. So from there, we have our inputs. And we're going to, right now, this append method is on a string. So we're going to need to convert that to a text. So in here, where we call our collected text, and I call set text to update the text. I'm going to take this in here, and it will do a string to text conversion. And from there, this is the function that's going to allow us to update our text. So I'm going to compile that and save that. And then from the game HUD, just going to save that. So this is going to allow us to update our text. So we're going to be calling this in the event that we're actually updating our collected text. So within our game HUD, we're going to be calling that function. And the way I can do this is the way I can get all the actors, or the way I can get all the pickup coins within the level, is by calling a function get all actors of class, and this will be of class, and there will be BP underscore pickup. So right now there's pickup coin and pickup. I just want to make sure that it's the blueprint pickup. So I'm going to go under my BP interactions, and it's named BP underscore pickup coin. So I'm going to go back into my game frameworks, and it's going to be BP underscore pickup coin, because that's the blueprint equivalent of our interaction system coin. And from there, I'm going to connect this to the game HUD. And right now we have this outer class, which is going to be all the, which is going to be the collection of all the, which will be an array of all our coins collected. So what we want from there is we want the length. So I'm going to drag and I'm going to say length, because we just want to know the number of coins in the level. And I'm going to promote this to a variable. And then this variable is going to be called total coins in level. So from there, now that I have the total coins from the level, I'm going to connect that in here, and I'm going to call the function within the game mode, which is going to be set collected text, or updated, or which is going to be update collected text. So from within the game mode reference, get game mode reference, and update collected text. And we'll notice this update collected text contains two functions. The first is the currently collected and the total collected. We know the total collected is just the number that this get all actors of class BP underscore pickup is spitting out. So I'm just gonna drag this within the total collected. So, and then just connect this with the update collected text. And then once we do that, we're gonna add to the viewport, we're gonna add the game HUD reference. And we're gonna compile that. And in here, we're gonna start the game. So right now it's saying it's 6 in the level, and we can confirm that by just looking at how many coins we currently have. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that turns out to work. So now we're gonna need some variable for this currently collected. And the way I can do this is I can take the total coins in level, I can copy it, and I can paste it, duplicate, and I'm gonna just say currently collected. And although we have duplicated it, it won't duplicate the actual value that this total coins in level is. So right now, if I were just to play this level, we'll notice, if I were to just play this level and just connect this to get currently collected, and just connect this to currently collected. So currently collected. So if I were to just save that and then play the level, we'll notice it says 0. Even though it's duplicating from an integer that contains 6 as its default or as its value, it's not going to duplicate the actual value. It will just duplicate the type of the variable, and then it will initialize it to 0. So if we go into our game mode, we're going to need to update this currently collected. So we're going to create a function to update the currently collected coins. And so within our functions tab, I'm going to create a new function, and I'm going to say currently update currently collected. And this will just update the number of coins. So we're updating this currently collected number. So the way we can update it is just increment it. So I can say plus plus, increment int. So we have this plus plus operator. And then from there, now that I have my increment, I can get a reference to our game HUD reference. And I'm going to call a function with there called update collected text. And this is going to be updated with the new information. So the new information would be this currently collected being incremented by 1. So I can just drag that in. And then the total coins in the level. One thing I can do to make it a little bit cleaner is just take this reference again. Since it's already been incremented, by the time it goes back into this, its value would have already changed. So like dragging this and then just putting it in here would have been the same result as just taking the reference that we have in here and dragging it in there. And then I'll just do the same for the total collected, total coins and level. Now this one won't really change, but we still have to supply it with the arguments. So we have that. We have this. So I'll just bring this closer. There we go. And if we save that, now if we go into our level, we play it, we notice it's 0. And we notice right now it's not updating the text, but that's because we didn't call this function at any point. We didn't call this update currently collected. And we know that this should be called in the event that the actor is interacting with the character, and the pickup is interacting with the character. And we know where that is because that's just in the interact function. So on the event that we're interacting with the character, call this destroy actor, but even before you destroy the actor, I guess it doesn't really matter when, but before you destroy the actor, get game mode and see if that game mode can be so we're going to cast to BP underscore game HUD. So on the event that we're casting and it succeeds, then we're going to call update currently collected, which is this function that we just created, update currently collected. So with that, I'm going to go back into my interactions. So update currently collected and then destroy the actor. So we have that, compile and save. And going back to the main level, if we play it, we notice, yeah, and then just make sure that everything's connected. So save that, and we're gonna play it. So when I move, it takes the coins, it collects them, and it updates the text. So with this, we have our win-lose state for when the player wins a level and when he loses the level, as well as functions that we can use to update our currently the total number of coins in the level and how many the player currently collected. So with that, all I would have to do is create our last bit of logic, which will be our pause menu. So the way we can do this pause menu is we're going to our game mode, since our game mode is responsible for creating all the UI. And I'm going to create a new function, and I'm going to call this function, this function is going to be called toggle pause menu. So with this toggle pause menu, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a condition in here. So right now the game mode can't accept any bind accesses, or it can't listen to any events that the player types in. So in this case, since we're wanting to activate the pause menu in the event that the player hits tab, so I would have to go into my maps or I would have to go into my inputs. And in this case, instead of using an access mapping, I'm actually going to use an action mapping because this is like a one-off key press. And it's going to be create or remove pause menu. And then I'm just going to associate that with a tab. And so from there, I'm going to my game HUD. And in the event that the player, so right now, I can't listen to that event that I just created, this create game HUD. I can only listen to that within the player controller or my main or I can listen to that through the player controller, which we haven't created our own custom one, or through the game, or through our BP underscore ball pawn. So what I can do is in my characters, in my BP underscore ball pawn, I can go into my project settings, just copy that word and go back into our main menu, or go back into our character and then right click and paste that word. And this is our access event. So what we're going to do is on the event that the input action is pressed, and we're also going to see if the game mode, get game mode, can be casted to BP underscore game HUD. In the event that it can be casted and the key is pressed, what I'm going to supply it with is, I'm going to call the function I just created in there. I'm going to call a function which I just created within the game HUD, and that's going to be toggle pause. That's going to be toggle pause menu. So in here, it's going to be toggle pause menu. So we have that. Within our game HUD, we're going to need information about whether the game is paused or not. So I can do that by adding an input in here and say, is game paused? So with that, I can go into my BP underscore ball pawn. Could not find the function toggle pause menu. Okay, so it was giving a warning that I couldn't find the function, and that's because I just forgot to save it and compile it. So then from there, I'm just gonna redo this, pause menu, toggle pause menu, and see if that compiles. Okay, so it does. So from there, I'm gonna say is game paused. So on the event that the game is paused, then what should we do? In that event, we should toggle it so that it's, on that event, we should toggle it so it's not being paused. But even before that, one issue we're going to encounter when we pause the game is it will pause the game and it won't even listen for the toggle. So hitting tab again to unpause it. So the way around that issue is to click on this input action and say execute when paused. So even when the game is paused, I still want you to listen to this event. And by doing so, now we go into our toggle pause menu. And then in the event that the menu is paused, so I'm going to have a branch. So if the menu is paused, then unpause it. If the menu isn't paused, then pause it. So if the menu isn't paused, which means this condition will be false, then I would want to create my menu or create my pause menu. So I'm going to say create widget. And so far we don't have the widget for our menu paused. So I'm just going to have to create that. So within our UI, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say user interface and widget blueprints. And this will be BP underscore or WBP underscore pause menu. So within this, I'm going to add text. So drag my vertical box. And I'm going to add a border. There we go. And I'm going to add text on it. And the text will be pause menu. So I'm just going to add space. And I'm just going to make this, I'm going to make sure that when I click on my vertical box within the hierarchy, I'm just going to center this. I'm going to make the position 0 and 0. And I'm going to make the size 400 or 200. And the size is 200. And I'm just going to make the alignment 0.5. So now with that, text. Oh, I think I already have my text. I'm just going to change the color. And I'm just going to add functionality in here. So it's going to be button. I'm going to have text. And the text is going to be resume. Now add another button, and I'm going to drag this button in here. I'm going to add a third button, and I'm going to drag this button in here. So one is quit. One is select level, and the other is one is resume, one is select level, so I'll have that select level. And the other is quit. So yeah, I'm not really going to put in much effort for the pause menu other than that. Now I'm just going to add some logic. So on the event that we have resumed, that means we're calling the logic that we have for our pause menu. So in here, I'm just going to create WBP underscore pause menu. So I'm just going to go through the logic of creating the pause menu. So on the event that we're not paused, that means we're going to have to create a pause menu. In that circumstance, then I'm going to store a reference to our pause menu. And I'm going to say pause menu. And from there, I'm going to get the player controller. And the player controller is going to be set input mode. So we're going to need to listen for events, and we're going to need to be able to click. So we're going to have it game only, game and UI, and not just game, or not just UI, sorry. Because we're listening for that tab event when it's paused. So in that, and then we're also going to say get player controller. And set show mouse cursor, and then we're going to set it to true because we want the player to be able to see the cursor. So if we compile this, yeah, and then at the very end, we would need to add it to our viewport. So we're going to get our pause menu reference that we just created. And this is kind of one of the benefits of storing it as a variable, because otherwise we would have to take this and then like try to drag it up into that spot. So with this way, we kind of have it disconnected, but not really, since we have a reference to it. So we have add to viewport, and we're adding the pause menu to the viewport. And then from there, I'm going to use the logic that actually is responsible for pausing the game, and that's set game paused. And we have this here. And if the game is paused, is game paused, then we want it to unpause it. So we're going to say not Boolean, because we're not interested if we know that the game is already paused, then this is just going to continue pausing it. So just do the negate. So we're just going to negate what the pause is doing so that we have the opposite result. So this is in the event that the menu is paused. And now for the event that the menu isn't paused, that means we're going to have to hit tab again to remove it. And the way we can do this is we're going to take our true. So true, the menu is paused, then unpause it. So we're going to use a function inside called remove from parent. So we're going to take our pause menu reference that we just created in here. And we're going to take that and we're going to get it. Remove from parent. And this will remove our pause menu from the viewport. So we have that. And then from there, I'm going to have to set the input to be game mode. So get player controller. And set input game only. So when we're actually playing the game, we just want it to be in game only. And we have that there. And from there, we're going to say get player controller, because we want to make the mouse disappear in this event. So it's going to be show input, set show mouse cursor. And I'm just going to separate these because they seem a little too close together. Show mouse cursor, and we don't want to show the mouse cursor when we're in the game. We're going to unpause the game, and we can do this by saying, is game paused? And this is a function that Unreal provides. And then we're going to say not Boolean. And then from there, we're going to say set game paused. And we're going to connect. So we have our set game paused. So from there we compile and we're going to test if this works. So I'm going to hit start and then hit tab. And we have our text. So if I hit tab again, it unpauses and it pauses the timer. The design is a little bit weird, but I mean, it's the end of the video. So yeah. And then we have resume. So currently the buttons aren't really doing anything. So let's just really quick add our logic for that. So on the event that we have our pause menu in the designer tab, what we would want to do is when the player hits resume, that means we can assume that he's currently in the pause menu and he's trying to unpause the game, which means that in our graph section, I'm just going to put resume, going to rename these resume button and select level. Button and quit button. So now that we have our three buttons, so in the resume level, I'm gonna click on resume level, and on the event that it's clicked, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the logic that I used to determine how our game should be paused. So within our game framework, in our game HUD, this is the logic that it does to unpause the game. So all I would need to do is take all this logic in here and paste it within our game HUD. And I just don't need to create the widget. There we go. So in resume, you're going to remove from parent. And right now it says the reference is a pause menu, but that isn't necessary because we are already in the pause menu. So that means it would just be a reference to self, and that should work. And then we have set input game only. That's fine. Show mouse cursor, that's fine. And then we have this, which is also good. So this will be the correct logic for resuming our button. As for our quitting our game, it's nothing special. We're just going to drag a node and we're going to say quit game. And then, yeah. And as for our select level, we're going to do on click. And then when we click the level, we're going to say open level. And the level we're going to be opening is going to be the main menu. So main menu. So we have that. And then we're going to compile that and save it. And we're going to play the level again. So hit tab, resume, unpauses the game, hit tab again. I guess one thing I could do just to make things a little neater is in the pause menu, I'll just increase the size of my vertical box. So right now it's 200. I'll make it 400. And I'll make the size 400. So from there, hit pause. It's a little bit more apparent, and I can just go into my widgets and center this text. There we go. So we have our pause menu, we have a resume. So if I hit 11, resume, and we have our pause menu. So resumes the level, select level, takes us back to the main level, and quit ends the game. So yeah, so this concludes all our widgets. Oh, one thing I forgot to add is since these other levels should depend on that game mode that we just created. So for example, we have level 1 we have set up correctly. Since in its world settings, it has BP_game HUD, but we would have to do that for level 2 and level 3 as well. So BP_game HUD. And save that. And level 3. BP_game HUD. We would also need to make sure that our main menu is set to BP_main menu, which I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, it is. So yeah, so this concludes the end of this level. Yeah, so if you liked it, please hit like and let me know if there's anything you want me to cover.